Okay, so we're receiving our args here, and we're placing them inside a vector string. So let's create a new function called parse args, and inside here we want to return some arguments. So let's actually take this logic out of run, place it inside of here, and now in here we'll just call parse args. And now that we're looking to return a argument struct, what we'll do is we'll create it, and we'll say our pattern is going to be args of 0, and then we just want to clone it, that way we get a copy of it. And then we want to do the same thing for the rest of our fields. So we'll have input file, it's going to be args of 2, and lastly our output file, it's going to be args3 dot clone. Okay, so now we're getting all of this printed out. So let's actually just make sure that what we get is correct. So let's print out our args right here. There we go. There. And now we'll say args. So if we run this, helps if I add in arg1, 2, 3, and 4. We see that our pattern was assigned arg1, replace arg2, input arg3, output arg4. So everything there looks correct. So we know that we're handling and assigning our arguments into the arguments array properly. So now we'll actually keep it that way. So we'll say let args equals parse args. So now we need to handle how we get the data to and from the file system. So we have done a little bit of this before, so we already know that the designers of the standard library made this pretty easy for us to do. We do need to import in the standard file system, and this is going to let us gain access to the methods that we require. So now we can create a read and write function, which is going to accept a reference to our arguments struct that we just created, and we're not going to return anything, but now we're going to say let data match, and then the fs, which is file system, read to string, and we see that it's going to return a result to us, but we need a path to what file we want to read in, and it's going to be our args input file. So now that we know that we also returned in, or we're getting returned a result, we need to make sure we handle the errors in case that we get any. So if we're returned an OK, awesome. We want that the result inside of the OK to be assigned to data. Otherwise, if we get an error, then we need to handle the error. So we're going to print out failed to read from file, and then we'll print out our file name. And now we're also going to want to print out our error for us. So we'll do again what we did earlier, error.read.bold, and then we want to print out our args.input file name, and then we also want to print out the error. And as we did earlier, we want to make sure that we exit the process with an exit code of 1 to signify that, hey, it was not a successful completion. And then we also want to match on writing, because we are eventually going to have to replace the strings in our file with our desired replacement string. So in here, we're going to have our args.output file. And then we're also going to need the data, which in this case, what we're going to do is, just to get this logic wired up, we're just going to basically copy the cargo.toml file and then just output it to a copy.toml file, just to make sure that our reading and writing logic is being done correctly. So in this case, we do not care what the OK result is going to return, but we do care if we get an error. And I need to correct that. And again, like what we did earlier, instead of it being reading, it's going to be writing. Failed to write to file error, and then we'll have output file, and then we'll also have our error message there. Awesome. So all of that should be good. We'll call read and write, and then we'll pass in a reference to our arguments. So just to make sure our error logic still works, we call cargo run with no arguments. We see that our error messages are printed out successfully. So now in this case, we will say cargo run arg1, arg2, because we don't necessarily care about those yet, because that'll be what our regex is looking at. And now we want to do cargo.toml to copy.toml. Okay, so it ran successfully, and we see that we were generated a copy.toml file. So if we look at our cargo, that's what we see, and then inside of here we see that they are the exact same thing. So with this, we were able to verify that our reading and writing to file logic is being done correctly. So now the next step is going to be to find some strings in a text and then replace it with a new desired string, which we will do in the next lecture.